And we're back. Starting only a few days on, after that one-eyed Lucius Malfoy looking fella killed his Noel Gallagher cosplaying cousin Lucerys sort of kind of accidentally on purpose, whilst on top of his giant fuck-off dragon called Vega. And naturally, now everyone's super pissed off about it, isn't she? Anyway, surviving bastard brother Jacaerys Valerian visits Lord Cregan Stark up in the frozen north of Winterfell to ask for some support given a civil war's kicking off after the king recently died of scabs and the Greens did a naughty coup and stole Princess Rhaenyra's throne what her dad promised her, and just to go and put an eggy prince on it. Or some shit. But Lord Cregan reckons he can't spare any soldiers for said civil war down south, because he needs them up here to guard a giant ice wall, and also to fend off chilly wind and bad weather and stuff. Elsewhere, Matt Smith in a wig, aka Prince Daemon, is super pissed about that coup thing and also the recent death of his niece's mop-haired kid, and totally wants some sweet vengeance, yo. But Rhaenys reckons that recklessly trying to go after King Aegon without a plan is a proper suicide mission. And besides, they can't do anything until Queen Rhaenyra says so, and she's too busy being off having a meltdown about her deaded son. So shut up about it already. But he just says, if you weren't such a fucking melt and had just scorched all them fuckers when you had them right in front of you at Literal Dragon Point back at the end of Series 1, Episode 9, then none of this would have bleeding happened, bro. And we'd all be sitting around in that cosy castle and enjoying caviar and champers, bitch. Also elsewhere, the Matrix superfan is back in town, as Lord Corlys Velaryon mourns the death of his grandson and last remaining heir, and promptly meets with our first new character of the series called Sir Alan of Hull, who seems to live up to his name by repairing hulls of ships and shit. Which is great, because they're going to need all the firepower they can get in that upcoming Civil War thing. And he apparently owes this Alan fella a life debt, given he's the one what apparently pulled him out of the sea off screen last epi.
Okay.
Anyway, over in King's Landing, the Eggy King comes to collect his beloved kid, Prince Jaehaerys, and also wonders what the fuck his barmy sister wife is banging on about, talking about being worried about non-existent rats what no one else can see and stuff.
The Queen is an enduring mystery.
Meanwhile, Queen Alicent is getting a quick smear test done by her main Kingsguard commander, Sir Criston Cole. Though he's unfortunately left his equipment at home, so there was no other choice but to use his tongue apparently. Lol, what's he like? Anyway, the next day, the King's small court convenes to sum up the state of things. Given Rhaenyra's team of blockaded King's Landing is accruing allies by the day and totally ignored all their letters apologising for yeeting their mop-haired kid and shit. And although Alicent totally hopes war can be avoided if they just keep cucking and saying sorry for doing all these bad things, Otto warns that war is now pretty much inevitable, so the king needs to man up and prepare accordingly. Later, that creepy Lord Larys freak says he's yeeted all the traitors what didn't like that coup thing they just did, and the dodgy schemer what's always bloody scheming and even once killed his own father and brother in a fire just to get power over the saucy queen what he has a massive crush on, says he's now chosen all her new house staff personally. And before you can say, this'll end well, we cut to Rhaenyra arriving on a beach. And after awkwardly slipping off her dragon with a bit of dodgy CG animation, she finds the washed up remains of her son Lucerys and his pussy old dragon Arax. You know, the one what rudely burped in Vhagar's face and got them all munched up for their troubles. And she soon has a little cry about it. Which goes on for a bit too long, to be honest. And even her own dragon's like, listen girl, stop all this bloody snivelling, because you've got loads of other kids at home, and two of which ain't Sir Harwiny-fathered bastard boys what look like a racist tribute acts. So stop looking back in anger and shut up about it already. Anyway, after the Eggy King tells the local peasants to stop banging on about his dragon munching up all their sheep or some shit, creepy schemer Larys reckons he needs a new hand. But not in the form of a limb or nothing, but more that Otto fella was his dad's advisor, and he's dead now, so he needs to get some new blood around here with some fresh ideas. Elsewhere, Prince Daemon reunites with his ex-floozy Mysaria, aka the White Worm, who was responsible for selling them all out at the end of the first season. He then tells Sir Eric, one half of the identical twin brother soldiers who have now seemingly split up and are on different sides of the conflict I guess, to sling that dutty hoe in the dungeons already, given she's a massive traitor what screwed them all out of their birthright and lineage and shit. Suddenly though, Rhaenyra returns and demands the head of her son's naughty murderer killer, which of course is music to Daemon's ears. So he promptly goes off and hires a bunch of grubby assassins called Blood and Cheese, and yes those are their real names apparently, to totally yeet Lucius Malfoy, aka Prince Aemond, and bring back his golden noggin already. And after the Targaryens say a final goodbye to little Lucerys at his funeral and presumably burns his body to the tune of his favourite song Wonderwall, the grubby assassins pose as rat catchers to totally gain access to the castle. Meanwhile, the aforementioned Prince Aemond moans to Sir Kristen Stewart all about how his mum blames him for starting a war just because he carelessly killed his cousin and totally started a war. And she's a right pussy old melt trying to simmer tensions and avoid inevitable war all the time. So Otto bursts in and finally bollocks him for murdering his own relatives and putting the stability of the kingdom at threat, and tells him that going around setting giant fuck-off dragons on tiny soy boys who are in desperate need of a haircut and also escalating civil wars in the process just ain't fucking on, son. So he better keep his bloodlust in check and stuff. Also, meanwhile, them blood and cheese fellas have made their way up into the royal quarters and soon take the weirdo queen hostage, given they've seemingly got super lucky and there doesn't seem to be any guards around keeping an eye on the royal family at all.
Nice.
And because they reckon any old son for a son will do, as opposed to having to fight it out with that badass one-eyed Aemon fella and yeeting a small infant is much easier anyway, they promptly make the weirdo queen tell them which of her looky-likey identical twin sprogs is the male. And before you could say, I'm no expert, but before current day clown world, boys used to be the ones with a fucking cock, they just flat out trust her when she points out one of the sleeping kids, who's then promptly beheaded off screen, as she then gets a haircut at Dodge and bursts into Alison's room to find her shagging Sir Kristen Stewart's brains out, which totally explains why he wasn't at his post whilst her child was being viciously beheaded in his bed by a pair of grubby assassins laughably called Blood and Cheese. And that's it. That's the first epi. Though my favourite part was when the writers felt the need to show just how much of a scumbag the Ratcatcher was by having him punt a small dog. Fuck off! Which they didn't really need to do, given he's played by a middle-aged straight white man on prestige TV, so we've already been conditioned to assume as much. Anyway, on to episode 2. We start in the immediate aftermath of that unfortunate infanticide incident, as the Eggy King has a total meltdown about the yeeting of his favourite son, what he incestuously fathered with his own sister wife, and Aemon just thanks God he weren't about last night. And in emergency court later that evening, King Aegon demands to know how on earth his heir ended up deaded in his bed, and soon asks Sir Kristen where he was when he's supposed to be head of security and shit. And before he can say, I don't know, but it certainly wasn't being balls deep in your mum, that's for sure, the king just rages about wanting sweet revenge on that Rhaenyra bird who presumably orchestrated all this madness, whilst Larys bursts in and says they actually caught one of the naughty murderer killers trying to escape the castle. But before the king can storm off to rip this guy a new arsehole, Otto reckons they can still make some good of this if they do a public funeral procession and tell the plebs about the super naughty bad things what the phony fakey queen has done to their real king and she. Later that morning, Alicent visits Helena to make sure she's alright after essentially being put through a real-life Sophie's Choice and having to choose which of her kids to have yeeted, and also to make sure she ain't going to tell anyone about her saucy love affair with Sir Kristen after she rudely barged in on him last night without knocking. So, whilst the queens are out parading the hacked-up body of the little incest baby Jaehaerys, and totally stirring up hatred by making the public now despise Rhaenyra for stooping as low as late-night kiddie murder, Larys makes that grubby blood fella reveal all about how Daemon was the one what hired him and that equally grubby Ratcatcher, before King Aegon does a hate crime by smacking up a local fatty. Meanwhile, over in Dragonstone, Rhaenyra just can't believe she's being blamed for decapitating her own nephew when she weren't even there nor knew anything about it, especially since she too has lost her son and would never inflict that kind of pain on anyone else, bro. Not least her own half-sister and half-sister-in-law. And although her courts say their public position is completely ruined and their claim to the throne severely undermined now everyone hates her guts, she soon realises that it was her naughty uncle husband what's totally screwed her and not in a good way. Mainly because he can't hide his constant smirk and raging lob on after hearing about assassins totally sticking it to their enemies and also little blonde boys in their bed. Naturally, Rhaenyra is furious and doesn't quite believe him when he says he didn't mean for that little one to get hurt, and that he was very clear in his instructions to only kill that Lucius Malfoy looking fella with a gammy eye. And worse, she reckons he don't give a stuff about supporting her campaign to reclaim the throne, and it's just rather using her as a tool to grasp at his stolen inheritance. which makes him so angry he smacks up a pair of innocent cups and insists he's on the up and up. But alas, she just can't trust this violent nutter what loves undermining kings, recklessly courting danger to save his own ends, and who's literally called Damon. So he just shrugs, and flat out admits that his brother Viserys only made her queen because he was scared of him, and wanted to keep him away from all out power. But she just says it's more the fact that he couldn't trust him either, which seems to have been a wise decision, especially now he's just gone behind her back and yeeted a little kiddie and stuff. So he sods off to Harrenhal to try and raise an army, and presumably just get away from his nagging wifey niece, who keeps banging on about how he can't do anything right these days.
What a fucking liberty!
Anyway, she then tells her stepdaughter Baela to take her dragon moon dancer and keep an eye on King's Landing, so they can have a heads up when they inevitably all come out for revenge and shit. Elsewhere, a guilt-ridden Sir Criston totally cringes watching the murder scene get cleaned up, so later goes down to the mess hall and tells the knackered Sir Aric to stop scoffing his face and get his cloak cleaned already, cause you're totally sullying our honour, bitch. But he just says, "God, that's rich, coming from a top shagger who's now shagged 2 queens under his guard." So naturally, Sir Criston projects all his guilt and shame onto this poor sap and smacks him up like a rye mill. And given his own twin betrayed them all by siding with that killer queen what he indeed used to shag back in the day, Criston implies that he could have actually been a mole who totally let them all in and shit. And so he demands he prove his loyalty and totally restore all their honour by sneaking into Dragonstone and totally killing that killer queen. And understandably hesitant to go off to his assured death just because his boss is projecting all his own shit onto him, Sir Criston tells him to shut up and go infiltrate the castle by pretending to be your own brother and totally yeet that evil queen already. And before he can say, "Well, can I at least finish my porridge before I embark on this utterly mental suicide mission, especially given it's likely to be my last fucking meal on Earth?" we cut to Jace and Baela talking about their daddy issues, given hers is a hot-headed sister marrying Fruit Loop and his real one died in a fire, whilst his phony fakey chocolate one ended up faking his own death and rowing off in a small boat with his homosexual lover boy. Who's some shit? Elsewhere, a nudie naked Aemon's talking through some emotional issues of his own, but here with a part-time therapist who also happens to be a brothel madam on the side. Because he can't believe he almost died last night just because he accidentally totally killed his scrawny soy boy nephew, and was just bloody lucky that he was out crying all night in the laps of local brothel whores. Also elsewhere, we meet some new characters, including local blacksmith Hugh Hammer, who has a sickly sprog, and part of the population who are all suffering from Team Rhaenyra's blockading of King's Landing, as food shortages have meant that his wife Cat is paying 3 times the normal cost for a simple chicken. Kia! Sounds like a standard trip to KFC these days. While Sir Alan of Hull meets up with his brother Adam with 2 M's, who pleads with Alan to go sail with that Matrix superfan to totally make their fortune. But he just says no chance, mate, because there's totally a war brewing, son. And besides, I repair ships, not fight on them and shit. Meanwhile, back at Dragonstone, Rhaenyra interrogates Daemon's prisoner and ex-floozy Mysaria about her role in his secret scheme what totally went tits up and needlessly escalated a war. But she says she only gave him the names of the assassins to hire and totally don't want anything more to do with any of it. But Rhaenyra can't really trust that she won't sell them all out again if she lets her go, so just tells her to shut up whining on about her tragic backstory and sends her back to the cells. At King's Landing, however, King Aegon's gone and put up some new decorations. Unfortunately, these new ornaments are made out of human corpses. Cause turns out he's gone and hung the entire team of rat catchers just to make sure he's got the fatso's grubby accomplice. Which he has, and even his abused dog's kinda sad that his grubby owner's no longer around to give it a good kicking no more.
Aww.
Naturally, all the plebs are pretty shocked and appalled at the callousness of the new king, and also at the dirtying up of the streets with stinky bodies of people's mostly innocent fathers, sons and brothers and stuff. Which is something that Otto's pretty appalled at too, to be fair. And once again totally bollocks the impulsive brat for ruining their earlier plan and totally squandering all their goodwill earned from the public funeral procession. But the eggy king has had enough of his granddad's constant yammering, bollockings and refusal to get his hands dirty and take the fight to the enemy. So promptly tells him to shut up and hand the badge of the hand over to his new hand Sir Criston Stewart, given he's already stepped up and sent that twin off to pretend to be his own twin and she. Because petty revenge is all he cares about, bro. But before he can say, "Well, that guy? The Prince of Persia looking fella what's been shagging your mum on the side, and also took your auntie's virginity that one time back in season 1 and when she looked like Will Poulter in a wig?"
LOL!
Otto just lobs it over to the bloke what keeps failing upwards despite being so bad at his job that he let 2 amateur grubby killers gain access to the royal chambers and kill the next in line to the throne.
No!
Meanwhile, Rhaenyra decides to release her hubby's ex-floozy after all, given they've now bonded over how Daemon used to smack her about and stuff, and tells Sir Eric to sort out her departure. But as she leaves, she totally recognises that dopey Sir Eric trying to pose as his own twin bro, who hilariously gets caught out by a prosy before he even arrives at the gates. But luckily, she doesn't seem to raise the alarm for some reason, so he ends up tricking his way into the castle pretty easily, just like them blood and cheese fellas did last epi. And just as Rhaenyra is settling down for a good night's rest, Eric bursts in to finally yeet her, and it looks like it's curtains for the rightful queen who just can't catch a break these days. Until suddenly, his other self bursts in, and the lads soon start to wrestle about and also smack their stiff and solid swords. It's steady. But because Sir Criston sent his man out without letting him finish his Weetabix and thus hasn't built up his strength this morning, Sir Eric is swiftly bested and totally killed by his traumatised bro. At least I think it's Eric. I can't really tell, given all straight white men look alike to me. But it doesn't really matter anyway, because the other one probably commits seppuku, because reasons. And because one half of his soul just died and he's royally screwed anyway, I guess. And a shell-shocked Rhaenyra just can't believe that's now the second week in a row where a poor twin has died. Nor that Baylor didn't give her a heads up about their enemy's movements, because she had one friggin' job, bro. Later, Otto also just can't believe that he just got fired by his own royal grandson after constantly bollocking the actual king and telling him his dad was a better monarch than him. And as Otto realises that he can't control Aegon, and much like Rhaenyra can't control her hot-headed uncle hubby, he can't really stay around here any longer, so he's heading off to Old Town where people still appreciate the high towers and stuff. And we end with Alicent being such a wonderful mother that she just awkwardly shrugs and walks away from her grieving son who just lost his own son today, because she'd rather go and have another sadomasochistic sex session with Sir Criston, who is still so guilt-ridden he totally lets her slap him up like a little bitch, isn't she? And that's it. That's episode 2. Though my favourite part was where Alicent asks Sir Criston if he's going to confess about their affair in some sort of honourable attempt to find absolution. And he just says,
There is none for what I've done.
well, they sure seem to forgive you pretty quickly after that time you smashed in the face of that homosexual fella at that wedding 20 odd years ago. But anyway, that's the plot and that's your lot. Considering that meal things so you don't miss episodes 3 and 4 when they drop. Tell me if you like the first 2 epis in the comments if you have time. And I'll see you in the next one.